just like figure it out. And that was really cool though. It was cool figuring out like how to balance what's the next thing. What you can do. Yeah.
Welcome. Hey. Okay, so welcome everyone. My name is David. I'm VP of Engineering at Jackrabbit Mobile, and I want to welcome y'all to the April Austin iPhone Developer Group. Today we've got 3 talks that we're going to have presented. The first one's going to be by Caroline. She's got to talk about the floating animation library that she made and that's available for y'all to use. Then we're going to have Ketan talk about his app that he's just released on the App Store called Carroll. And then we're going to have Matt demo his drone, or his Apple Watch controlling a drone demo and talking a little bit about how it works. And I also wanted to let you all know about 2 hackathons that are happening in Austin this month. One of them is Angel Hack, and this is a really fun hack that I've been to before. It's like a whole weekend, and they recruit a bunch of like smart people to work on an app idea. And so that one is on April 9th through 10th, and they gave us a code that will get you a free ticket to it. So the code is hack4AH9. So if you use that, you can get free ticket to the hackathon. And then there's another hackathon April 23rd through 24th. And that one's hosted by Athena Health. And it's called the More Disruption Please Hackathon. So that one sounds pretty interesting as well. And then that's all the announcements I had for today. So after the talks, we'll still hang around so everyone can continue whatever you want to be talking about and networking. But for now, we're going to get started with Caroline on her talk.
Yeah, so I'm Caroline. I'm an iOS developer at Jackrabbit Mobile with David, and I'm here to talk to you a little bit about bubbles. So it kind of starts with the ATX startup crawl. Who all is familiar with the crawl? Okay, cool. For those of you who don't know, it's a big bar crawl that Capital Factory puts on through local startups. And each year, Jackrabbit Mobile creates an app for the crawl, and it includes a map and bus routes and information about companies. And this year, we revamped the entire app, and we wanted to do something really fun for users to give them some more real-time information about popular stops. So our designer Patrick was inspired by Periscope's like functionality. So if any of you have used the app, you can see there that when you tap it, it likes it, and then the little hearts come up. So each one of those hearts is a tap, so it's not just one tap. So the point is you're supposed to tap it really hard, and it gets kind of addicting, and you want to keep going. So we wanted to do something sort of like that, and so I was given pretty free rein to come up with an animation to illustrate when people like a company. So we decided to call it Cheers, since it is a bar crawl after all. And if you downloaded and used this year's app, you'll know that this is what I came up with. So when you cheers a company, you've got a bunch of little bubbles that sort of pop up, and it's supposed to be, beer bubbles. And your cheers count increments, and anybody that has the app can use this. So if you go to a table and you really like a company, you can go on the app to find out more about them and give them some cheers. We even had one company that shared it on their Twitter feed, and they got over 20,000 cheers. So it was pretty popular. And the reason that you wanted to get a lot of cheers was we had this trending section. So every 15 minutes, we'd kind of calculate who had the most cheers in that last 15 minutes. And then you got to be at the top of the crawl. And so you can see some kind of bubbles in the background there. And so basically, you would want to be at the top so that users could see you right away and get more information. And we even had a little marker on the map so that people would know where to find you. So it turned out to be a huge hit. In fact, this was our first and I think only review, and it was pretty much all about the bubbles. And it was really valuable because it encouraged users to continue to interact with the app, and we got a lot more user interactivity than the previous crawls. So today I'm going to talk about a little bit how I created the bubbles, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about a small library I created to sort of streamline and customize the animation. So I created a little tutorial that creates this little fish here. He's supposed to be swimming. And you can find the full tutorial on our website. And there's also a link to the full code. Because today I'm just going to go over some of the smaller, more important parts. So my first problem was like, how the hell am I supposed to do this? Because I didn't know a whole lot about animations. I knew I wanted to do a bubble. So I was trying to think, I can make it move up and down, and I can make it disappear, but how do I make it sort of curve like a real bubble would do? So I did a little research, and I discovered UI Bezier path. So UI Bezier path is used to create simple shape point-by-point lines using the move to point and add line to point methods. And then you can use control points to define Bezier curves to your path. So if any of you guys have used Illustrator or Photoshop and used a pen tool, you kind of know what I'm talking about. So this is from the Apple Docs, and as you can see, it's already kind of the shape that we need. So the next step was to sort of do the math, and I could impress you by writing out some beautiful polynomial equations, but I'm really lazy and I didn't do that, so I don't want to embarrass us both by trying. And instead I used pen and paper to calculate the starting, the end, and the 2 control points for my shape. So this is the actual notes that I had from the Startup Crawl app, and you can see sort of my button and my line, and I'm trying to do some math about where the points would be there. So if we do it for our little fish, we've got our starting point here, so it's going to be some x along the fish, and then we've got the y would be at the top of the fish here, and then our ending point is going to be the same x as our starting point, but it's going to be lower on the y scale to give it some height. And then our control points, you can see that they're about the same distance from here to here from the starting x, as well as they're about halfway, they're the same y, about halfway from the top. So that's kind of how I calculated where I wanted all my points to be. So here's a little snippet of code. So you can create the UI Bezier path, and then this bubble image view is an image view I already have in my view controller, and the frame is sort of right at the top of the fish here. And making my control points 1 and 2, and then to set the starting point, you use move to point, which seems a little weird because you don't want to move it there, you want it to start there. But use move to point, and then to create your curve, you say add curve to point using your endpoint, and then control point 1 and control point 2. Okay, so next all we have to do is animate the bubble along this path. And for this, we're going to use CA keyframe animation because it has a convenient path property. So we do a little setup, set the duration, set the CG path of that path that we just created to the path property of the path animation. And then we're going to set remove on completion to no for right now, and you'll see why in a second. And then finally add the animation to our bubble layer. So this is what we've got so far. Our little bubbles are going up, and they're just stopping at the top. But you can clearly see sort of the path that they're taking. If you do it really fast, you can see the line that it's going. So the next point is to give the impression that the bubble is popping. So what I did was I slightly increased the size of the view before I removed it from the sub view, the super view. So we'll need to use CA transactions for this because CA keyframe animation doesn't have a completion block property. They have a delegate method that we could use, but it gets a little bit messy since we have all of our views in this one controller. So I'm starting the transaction, and then inside my completion block, I'm basically just making it 1.3 size bigger, just a little bit, really quickly, and then when it's done, I'm removing it from its super view. And the part of code that you can't see is adding the animation to the layer and then ending the transaction. But you can find all of that on the GitHub repo. So this is what we've got so far now. You can see the little bubble. You probably can't see it way in the back, but it gets up there and then it sort of expands and then disappears. So now all that we have left is add a little bit of variation to it. So the first thing I did was swap the control points. So remember, we said this is our first control point and this is our second one. So it's always going to swing to the left and then to the right. But if we swap them, it would swing to the right and then to the left. So I did a little bit of a jumbled mess of sort of putting the control points in an array and then shuffling them and then picking one and the other. So that way it just kind of, they'll go in different directions randomly. The second thing I did was I randomized the ending point height. So remember that's, oops, this here, I'm basically randomizing this Y up here, just to give it different bubbles. Want to go smaller, and some of you want to go larger. And so I'm using a little method that I pulled off of Stack Overflow called random float between number and number, just to, so it will go at least 50, but it could go all the way to 300. And then the third, I randomized the control point widths. So if you remember, we had this T value from here to here and here to here. So I want to randomize that to be smaller and wider. And that will just make the bubbles kind of give some variation. If you have smaller width, you're going to have a straighter line. And if you have a large width, they're going to like swing kind of crazy. So I randomized that value. Fourth, I randomized the size of the bubbles. So this is kind of where I set the frame for the bubble image view. I'm just using that same method to get a random size between 5 and 30. And then lastly, I randomized the alpha of the bubbles. So to give it a little bit of depth, some bubbles are going to be lighter than others. And then after this, I moved all the bubbles to the fish's tail, because originally I was just having them above so you could kind of see. But now I moved them to the tail. And just remember, you can change your small numbers and your big numbers in there to kind of tweak it for whatever you like. So this is what we've got now. Fish is farting really bad. But you can see the different colors. There's different depths. Some of them are bigger. They're all going in different directions. So it kind of gives you a more natural look to the bubbles. And the last thing I did was I animated the fish. So just doing a simple method that's going to move the fish from the left to the right and then start back over and then call itself recursively, basically. And then the only thing that we do need to change is, instead of using the fish image views frame to determine where we want our bubbles to start, I'm using the fish image views presentation layer. Since the fish is going to be moving, you don't want the frame, you want the actual layer that's moving right now. Or you want the frame of the layer that's moving. So lastly, I just created a timer that would call the create bubbles method that would just make a bubble, and then I started the animation. And got the little fish that's swimming. It's very cute. So it's not as complicated as it seems. It's actually not a lot of code, and it really adds some value to your app. So I became a little bit obsessed with my bubbles. The rest of the Jackrabbit team probably really regrets putting me in charge of all this, because it's kind of the only thing I talk about anymore. And so I decided to create a little animation library which will allow you not only to create floating bubbles, but to create floating anything, essentially. So I call it JRM Floating Animation. And it's on GitHub under my GitHub, Carly Har, C-A-R-L-E-I-H-E-R. And all you have to do really is create a JRM floating animation view and then set the starting point for it. So in this case, I'm setting it in the center. And then you're going to add your image. So if you had a bubble, you'd just add your bubble image to our view. And then add the whole floating image view or the whole floating animation view to your view. And you can add as many images as you want. So say you want a couple different kinds of bubbles, then you can just keep adding them and it will randomly pick one of them. And then to animate it, all you do is call floating view animate. So I've got a lot of different settings that you can sort of add to your view or change to give you some more customization. And I'm going to show you sort of a little demo of some of the things that you can do. So we've already kind of seen the bubbles, but I obviously really like them. So when you tap here on the chest, it's kind of creating your bubbles. So we've already talked about the pop. Essentially, if you don't want it to pop, you can turn that off. Varying the alpha, we've already talked about that as well. So now they're all the same color and they're not popping anymore. You can also change, the max size of the object. So say you really want some really big bubbles, or the minimum size. And then I also added this allow you to customize the minimum animation height and the maximum one. So they'll at least go to here, but they won't go higher than there, basically. And then I also allow you to customize the starting point width. So when you created your floating animation view, you had a starting point. If you don't if you don't set the starting point width, it will just all start at that one point. But if you set the width, as you'll see that, they'll kind of come out along that line. And that's not necessarily the animation width, which is actually how far the control points can be. So that's kind of that. The other thing I did was I allow you to customize the shape. So in this instance, you can see I didn't set a starting point width, so they're all coming from the same point there, and they're just going straight up. And then you could also, but you could set it to curve right. So here they kind of start to trend to the right, or to curve left, which they'll sort of trend to the left. Or triangle, which they're just going to go all over the place. And then I also added this fade out property. So instead of popping, if for instance you want it to fade out, so if you can sort of see the note, it just sort of disappears from view with the alpha. If you turn that off, it will just sort of disappear from the view. And as you can see, I've got like three different type of music notes there. So that's kind of how you would use the add image. I just added 3 images to my view. The tractor's something, we kind of saw this with the fish, but it's a little bit similar. The only thing that here is I changed the animation width to have a really small value. So if you have a really wide animation width, that means your control points can be further apart, so then that means the animation could swing really hard. And so in this instance, I didn't really want it to swing. There's just supposed to sort of be puffing out. So I just made the animation width a small value. And then the last thing is I allow you to determine if the animation object should be removed from the super view when it's over. So if you just want the bubbles or the balloons to sort of line up and just hang out there, you could do that too. So that's all I really got for you guys. You can find my floating animation. It's a CocoaPod, or it's also open source on GitHub. The bubble tutorial, that's where the code would be for the little fish. And then you can also email me at jackrabbitmobile or hit my Twitter up at carlyhar. Does anybody have any questions? David?
Do you have any features you still want to add to your floating animation library?
Yes, I did get a feature request for your own completion block. So once the thing has been finished animating, you can set what you want to happen after that. So that's probably the next thing that I'll do. But if anybody has any suggestions, you can always make an issue on GitHub or email me or something.
There were quite a few bubbles on the Carroll app. Did you ever run into performance issues making that many?
We did. The only time that we did was it was a really old iPhone or iPod that we had. I think it was like an iPod 4 or something, like something really old. That's the only time. Other than that, I didn't hear much about it. the cheersing, we're not making network calls each time you press the bubble. So we're storing that, on the network so that everybody can see how many cheers the company has. But we're only updating that value when we leave the view, so that you're not doing it every time you had bubbles. Because I could see some performance issues if you were trying to hit parse every 5 seconds. But yeah, so not that we saw, just on some older versions. Yeah. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Links to all that stuff will be in the email recap. And next up we have the app Carroll.
Will automatically go, or?
Yes, you need to connect to the Capital Factory Wi-Fi. Actually, not that one. That's the one here. Password for that is Key Boston Hacking. And then the Apple TV is called Classroom.
Okay, hey everybody. My name is Ketan Kapasi. So I'm a recent graduate of UT, currently work at Dell. This is a pet project of mine that I started a couple months ago. It's called Carroll. It's on the App Store, initial release so far. So don't expect anything super flashy or fancy or anything. But it is on the App Store. If you want to search it and download it and follow along that way, feel free. But I'm going to go through a couple slides and just talk about the idea, and then I'll switch over to the app and just explain some of the features. So Carroll, and I'll get to why it's called that in a second. So our first question for everyone is, who watched the Super Bowl, not this year, but last year? The Patriots and the Seahawks Super Bowl game, right? So if you watch that game, you remember that at the very end of the game, there was a very big play, right? There was a very shocking interception that occurred, and at least the room that I was in, the people I was watching with, they were very expressive about their emotions regarding this play, because they were all not necessarily Seahawks fans, but Patriots haters, I guess. Anyway, so that play evoked a lot of strong reactions from people, and my thought at the time was, I'm going to basically go on Facebook or Twitter, express whatever I need to express. There are going to be a lot of posts from SportsCenter or ESPN or Bleacher Report, et cetera, not necessarily just on Facebook or Twitter, but on their own personal websites, right? So my kind of concern there, or the need I was looking for, was a consolidated space, right? A dedicated space just for that particular event, so that I could go to one place and talk to everyone who was watching the Super Bowl, and not need to again go to a lot of different mediums to talk about that. So again, I guess the seminal question: why wasn't there a space for everyone watching that play to interact with each other about it? And that's where this idea kind of comes in. So the idea the idea is event-based social media. So basically the way that I think about it is current social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, etc. It's continuous. You post about anything at any time to anyone. Discrete social media, in contrast, the way I kind of conceptualize it, is that communication and interaction should be around a particular event. And obviously that's going to be within a certain time frame, right? That's kind of how you would define an event. So the Super Bowl is a great example of this kind of event that would support or motivate this event-based social media. Right now, March Madness is going on. It's just there's one more game today, but the championship, for example, was yesterday. That's a perfect example of things that would motivate event-based social media, where you consolidate all of the content around a specific event and create a dedicated space for it. And there are plenty of other examples. So that got me thinking about what kind of app I could create to support something like that. And there are two things that I wanted to look at. What should the app that I create have, at least the baseline features, and what are major companies doing right now? What are the trends towards? And that's in landscape. So first is the core functions, and there's 3 core functions as the app is right now. The first is the event list, and you see a screenshot of that and it includes everything from TV shows to sports matches to I think that's book release down there, movie releases, album releases, things like that, right? Basically defined events, either by myself or users, that users will be able to interact around, rather than going to a current social media tool that is more disparate in nature. Each event in the event list is going to contain two parts to it, right? The discussion board and the chat group. So these are kind of self-explanatory. The discussion board is for basically general discussion, so all posts and all content related to that particular event. The chat group, meanwhile, is if you want a more specific and narrower set of people to converse with. And so currently the limit is 6 people, but that's obviously changeable. And I'll get into how I implemented the chat group in a little bit. So these are two screenshots of the discussion board and the group chat as they currently look. So for example, if you go into the app and you click on one of the events, you'll be able to see the discussion board. This one is for an upcoming soccer match. And then on the left, of course, is the discussion board, and on the right is, again, the group chat if you want to see a more specific or have a more specific conversation with people. And of course, the nature of those conversations are going to be quite different. So what's the landscape? What are companies currently doing, and how do I think about this in the context of what companies are doing right now? Over the last year, I've seen that social media companies are increasingly focused on particular events and supporting particular events. So Facebook, for example, aggregates content by searchable terms, and some of those popular searchable terms are things like the Super Bowl or March Madness, or every time there's like an election debate the last couple of months, every time I'm on Facebook, it'll say, see what other people are saying about GOP debate, Dem debate, etc. Recently, they also rolled out something called Sports Stadium for the Super Bowl, which essentially was, again, aggregated content around the Super Bowl. It was curated a little bit more than the average event, and so it had experts and images and stuff like that. And they plan the same for the Olympics. Twitter, if you've been on Twitter anytime recently, you'll notice the lightning bolt at the top of the in the little navigation bar area, which are called moments. And again, these aggregate content around specific events. And moments are not constrained to just events, articles, stories, whatever it is. And they provide a list of those moments for you to view, and then at the end it says, you're caught up on daily content. Just a couple of other things. Instagram also sends you push notifications to say that check out the events from, for example, the Grammy Awards or the Oscars or whatever. Those are at least notifications that I've received. Snapchat does something similar, aggregates content around, for example, college football games. So if you click on Snapchat's stories, you'll click on it and you'll see a bunch of snaps related to a college football game that's been going on. I just want to briefly touch on live streams. Twitch has it, which is pretty similar to what I'm looking at. Of course, they live stream and have a chat function right next to it. Twitter has it through Periscope. Facebook also now has live streaming. And Livefire, which I don't know how familiar everyone is with Livefire, but their tagline is they build social experiences around their content, but really what it is, they build those, or at least one thing they do, they build those comment boards around events or whatever content you have. And I'll touch on the model a little bit later. But that's the app Carroll. Has anyone figured out at this point why I've called it, and I should say I'm in the market for a better name, but has anyone figured out why I've called it Carroll in relation to that Super Bowl?
Pete Carroll.
There you go. Because when that happened, I was like, wouldn't it be great if he had an app named after him? So.
How are you finding your list of events? You just putting them in yourself?
Yeah, right now it's manual. One thing.
If you could like swipe to set like a notification whenever this comes on.
Say it again.
It'd be cool if I could
Yeah.
swipe on my table view cell, and then I'd have an option to like set a notification when
Absolutely.
it comes on. Like,
Especially when the event starts.
I want to
Yeah.
get to the Jungle Book. Yeah, like at 8 p.m. the Jungle Book comes out. I want a notification to remember to talk about it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And so I should mention what I'm primarily looking for in this forum is to get that kind of feedback, to see what kind of features should be coming out. Because as I said, initial release so far. What was the command to?
Command 2 or Command 3.
There it is.
Probably need 4 or 5 with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's go to 3. All right, appreciate it. But I agree. So a push notification to remind you when that event begins would be very helpful. And to answer your earlier question, yeah, right now it's manual. Part of that is, so there's 2 parts to updating the events. One is systematically updating them. So for example, I'll use the NBA as an example, right? They have a regular season where all the games are predetermined. That can be uploaded, whenever that comes out. In contrast, something like March Madness, where the games are decided kind of ad hoc, that's the kind of dynamic creation that also would be supported. So anyway, again, self-explanatory. You can scroll through the event list and click on whatever you'd like and discuss it. So the first one, this is what we saw in the slides. So if you click on that, you'll see the discussion board. At the bottom is the posting feature, and I'll just post another comment. And is it dynamic?
I just stuck that up there, actually. That's
Nice.
really cool. I just got my comment.
There you go. Dynamic in what sense?
Oh, that it would just capture mine live as I did it.
Gotcha. Question back there?
You got your answer.
Yeah.
When are you gonna add floating bubbles?
It's a good idea. So as I said, the chat group is the more specific function. So basically the way that this works is in code, which let me pull up here. Where are we? Here we go. So, and right now I'm using parse. One of my immediate short-term goals is to transition away from parse, which is really unfortunate because their cloud code is so easy to use. And it's kind of necessary for what I did with the chat button. But anyway, basically, the user's app will make a call to parse. Parse will check. So each event will have 2 particular columns that are of importance here. The first is the group ID, and the second is n, which is just a counter. So whenever n hits 6, the group ID increments. So when the user's app makes a call to parse, it'll check what what n is, the counter. If it's 6, the group ID will increment. If not, it'll assign that group ID to the user. That gets passed back to the user's app, on their phone. And then I make another call to save that data to the user's row. So a particular user row will have all these different events. And all those different events will have the corresponding group ID for that particular user. And so pretty simple implementation so far. In the future, I'm hoping to randomize that instead of just incrementing the group ID, randomizing it, adding the feature to allow you to join a group with your friends, for example. So 2 people you join with, and then the other 3 people are random, something like that. Yeah. So that's the group chat, discussion board, and the event list. Yes.
So what do you feel sets you apart from a lot of these other companies that you mentioned in your landscape?
So the biggest thing is the ability to talk about an event in either a general forum or in a chat group in a discrete manner. So for example, if I want to post something about the Super Bowl or whatever it is, I can do so on my Facebook feed, right? But that post will appear amongst the sea of my news feed, right? Amongst everyone else's posts. That's why Facebook and Twitter, et cetera, have made it a little bit easier to aggregate content by a specific search term, whatever it is. But it's still not exactly what I'm looking for, right? I'm not what specifically I'm looking for is I want to be able to see a list of events. I want to be able to talk about that in a discrete manner between a certain start time and a certain end time, and when that's over, I want to be able to move on. Twitter has, so I should touch on hashtags briefly, right? Hashtags might be one solution to this. Problem with hashtags is that there will potentially be 10, 20, 50, 100 hashtags for a given event. And again, that creates the kind of disparate nature of the conversation that I am not looking for, right? I want a more dedicated space. So.
There's also Reddit things about events, right?
Yeah. Reddit has, I think, So with Reddit, I kind of run into the same issue, right? I'm never going to see one particular or one dedicated thing just for a particular event.
I mean, they do that for specific things. So like, I think there's somehow like a feature where the moderators can have like the official discussion thread
Oh, okay.
for events. So that's.
I can look into it, yeah.
So is this purely going to be, there, you wouldn't be generating events based on users, right? The users wouldn't be?
That's a good question, actually. So, no, eventually, but in the beginning, I think probably yes, right? Because I can't capture every event myself. But the idea is for organizations, companies, et cetera, to be able to create events. So it's not like an event creation tool for you to create an event with like your friends, right? You would probably use Facebook more for that. This is more for like, again, if a large organization creates an event that is widely viewed either through TV or through movies or whatever it is, that would be the type of organization that would create events, yeah.
Have you looked at APIs like, I'm looking at Eventful and anything like that that specifically target collecting events and making their
No,
information?
you said Eventful?
Yeah, api.eventful.com.
Okay.
Looks like they look at concerts, sports, events, political rallies, that kind of thing.
Interesting. I'll look into that. Very cool.
How are you doing like the real-time chat with Parse?
It's just when you go into the chat group, it'll assign the group ID to the user, and then so whatever that user's group ID is, if it's 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. I'm just querying the database for that event and that group ID and the messages related to that group
And
ID.
you have to like pull to refresh to
Yeah.
get the messages.
That's my question. Is like,
'Cause-
how do you get
Right.
like he posted and it automatically?
Well, what's cool is that, so we talked about this last time, but they open source parse, right?
Mhm.
And they added this thing that's just for open source parsers called live queries, and you can subscribe to, you basically are like, it's like Firebase, you subscribe to that chat, and if there's an update on that chat, it'll push down, when there's a new message, yeah.
Oh,
you
I see.
totally-
See, I was gonna use a pod for that, but actually
Yeah,
that
and
sounds like a better
it's
solution.
called live queries, and they just put that out like
Okay.
Yeah.
2 weeks ago or something, yeah.
I
Very
can
cool.
see Firebase being really a good use case for these socket-based
Mhm.
messages. So we'll just automate. You don't have to like query constantly to.
I'm so nervous
find-
about Firebase just because of my whole experience with Parse at this point, but I guess Firebase.
Just use Parse server. It's awesome.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah. That's cool. So eventful and live query.
Yeah, live queries is a
It's part of
feature
Parse, yeah.
on Parse open
Yeah.
source server, yeah.
Sounds pretty good. I'll look into it. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem.
Any other questions, comments, concerns?
What if you could get or it would help you promote your app if you made it so that if someone posted in your app, it would also like post on Twitter, and then like via your app or something. Or
Okay.
if someone posted, like you can do like Facebook integration where it'll say like posted via this
Steve
app.
Carroll. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a good idea.
so that people can see the conversation.
So you said there's only 6 people per group chat, right? So is that like active chatting, or I guess it's just as soon as they click one of these events, they get added to that group?
Right. Right.
Because I could see it being valuable, like say if I just wanted to go look at a chat, but I wasn't planning on chatting,
On chatting,
and then you might end up in a group where like nobody's
Where
chatting.
no one's talking.
Yeah.
That's true. My hope is that if someone's just looking to read instead of interact, they stick to the discussion board. But that's a good point. What if they're just looking to see specific conversations? So makes sense. I saw a hand in the back.
Yeah, this is kind of back on that note of potential parcel alternatives.
Yeah.
And there's a service, or a software as a service kind of company I use that's really similar to Parse called Syncano. And I actually came across them when Parse was shutting down. I got the vibe that they weren't ready to launch, but they saw that the window of opportunity opened and they just kind of hopped over. But one thing is, I remembered they have like socket support built in as well. So like you can just within your app, there's like something you drop in, and it's just every time something changes, drop something. It's super easy to use. I've actually used it recently for a chat-like interface somewhere, and it's phenomenal. Like, it's really-
Syncano, was that service?
Syncano, yeah.
Okay.
So Sync ANO.
Yeah. Syncano. Okay. Cool.
That's a good one as well.
Thanks. All right. Anything else? Appreciate your suggestions. I'm quickly working on this, rolling out new features. If you saw it on the App Store, it's 1.0. I think I just put 1.1 up. Hopefully it should be up this week. So, yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ketan. Next up, we have Matt demoing his drone, which he's going to control with his Apple Watch.
It's the future.
Watch your heads.
Yeah, well, hit anybody.
It's the classroom.
Yeah. All right. No, of course I'm not on the right screen.
You drag it, yes.
Hey guys, I'm Matt Wanninger. I'm with Jackrabbit Mobile here in Austin, along with David and Caroline. We occasionally I'm also an iOS developer. We occasionally like to do what we call little lab experiments, where we'll play with just some new technology and experiment with drones or AR, VR, just any of that kind of stuff. And so David and I, that's why I have him listed here, worked on a little small project with a Parrot drone, a Parrot MiniDrone. You haven't seen one before. This is what it looks like, pretty small. It's $99 on Amazon, something like that. What we wanted to do was, we hadn't seen a lot of, we'd seen, of course, Parrot makes their own app where you can control the drone from your phone. There wasn't a whole lot out there with being able to control a phone from an Apple Watch. So we thought, hey, why not? Let's hop on there and see what we can do with that. So what we start out just doing a quick demo. Hopefully I don't hit anybody. It's happened before. Let me fire it up here. And help if I turned it on. So just a quick summary of how it works, and I'll go into more detail. We're actually using Parrot's SDK. They have an iOS SDK. And using that SDK, you can communicate, send commands to the drone to send position changes and all that stuff, change the yaw, the pitch, all that stuff. And then we're using the watch as an accelerometer to then communicate with the app to get the accelerometer values, and then using those accelerometer values to determine what commands we should send to the drone. So here I've got the drone, I'm connecting to it, green lights are on. All right, so I'm going to start the accelerometer. Start. Okay. So, no. It's starting. Good old. All right. Did you? Are you still connected to it? All right, let's try it again. Of course,
Oh no.
Sometimes there's problems with the colors. They get better or something, the drone can't fly.
well, during the crash landing, the propeller came off, so it's not going to fly without that. Let's see if I can find it real quick.
I can look if you want to keep talking.
Yeah. See, method. All right, well, that's a great way to have a demo. Let me just go ahead and just talk about a little bit what we did, and then hopefully we will find the propeller. We really need to buy an extra one. So generally what's supposed to happen is when I flip over my wrist, the drone will start and take off. There's a takeoff command that's provided by the SDK, and then based off the accelerometer readings, you can then maneuver the drone around. And let me go over to here. So to run the code, you'll need watchOS 2 or greater. That's what gives you access to the accelerometer on the watch. Without that, you won't be able to do that, or do the more advanced health kit stuff that you need to keep, which I'll explain what we use that for in a minute. It just flew out, huh? It's a little black.
Yeah, I know.
Well, and so you need an iOS 9 device. You need iOS 9 in order to use the watchOS 2, a watch running watchOS 2. And then we were using a Parrot MiniDrone. We tested this with the airborne cargo, is what this one is, running the 2.1.55 firmware. Other things that you'll need to actually set up the app, unfortunately, you can't just take the code and run, because we need health kit entitlements. I'll explain why we need that in a minute. And then the prising profiles, of course, to then use that. Let's. So just a quick overview of what we used. It's probably you can't read this in the back, but there is a the API that you use to actually get accelerometer data from the watch is the CM Motion Manager, and you can use that both for the phone and for the watch. In this case, of course, is used on the watch. In particular, there's an accelerometer update interval that tells you how many times per second that you want to get data from the watch, and then there's a accelerometer updates to queue method, which gives you the ability to and lost signal. Everything's breaking down for me, I guess.
Oh, I hope I didn't do that.
Life size reset.
That was probably great.
I think.
Are you sure it's not stuck to the cookie too much?
I think there's you plug this straight into your computer. That should work. There's some way to make that work.
There you go. All right. So anyway, I was going to jump in. So I'll jump into here. So the other things we'll use is to be able to communicate between the watch and the phone. You need to use a watch connectivity session. That's how we're sending the data from the watch to the phone. And then there's a send message that you use for that. And then this is the tricky one that really has caught up for a little bit. So when you're using the Apple Watch, anyone who's got one or has used one, what you noticed is, when you look at it, the display comes on, but then of course I'm facing towards you, like what happens? It's black, right? Just the display goes off, your app deactivates, you no longer get updates. So in order to keep getting updates from the accelerometer while the app's deactivated, we need to use, we tried some suggestions we found online. Well, first we were just trying to see, if I could keep my finger held down and the display stays on, but that's a little bit awkward to then move around with, and then trying to put other little styluses attached to it or something like that, because we didn't see any kind of way to do this offhand. We started playing around with the health kit workout session. I'm not an expert on it, but it did seem to solve what we were trying to do. basically, it's, we pretend like we're going for a run, we pretend like we're doing that, so we keep getting the accelerometer data and keep being able to send it to the phone, even while the screen's off and the app's been deactivated. So I'll go into that here in a second. So let's just jump into the code and look over here. Let's full size that. Let me use the So this is the interface controller for your Apple Watch. You can see we're a watch connectivity session delegate and an HK workout session delegate. In particular, the things that we need here are the CM Motion Manager for capturing accelerometer data from the watch. An operation queue, this is where as the accelerometer updates come in, they come through the queue. And then the HK Health Store and the workout session are essentially just used in this situation just to keep the app alive. So here we're just creating a queue, just using the main queue for this quick and dirty thing we come up with in a couple days. And then this is starting our watch connectivity session to connect to the phone. And then we're initializing our CM Motion Manager, setting the accelerometer update interval to 0.3. So the other trick here is when you're using a BTLE device that you can't overload it with too many requests too quickly. It's just not meant to do that. So we were initially trying like every 0.1 second, trying to push a new accelerometer update over to it, but we kept getting backup and it would just take forever to get new updates. And then here, so we settle it around 0.3, anywhere between 0.3 and 0.5, generally seem to be about okay. And also you have to think about frequency of commands sent to the drone as well at the same time. You don't want to be overloading it with too many commands either, same interface. And then, so initializing our health store. And so then, so here's where, so I have a little button that's you can't see on the watch, unless you're looking at the watch. But there is a button that says start session, and so what we do here is if the session's not started, we go ahead and init with an activity. We start the session. I just picked running. I don't know if this matters, what kind of session that you use, but we picked running because we figured that would be one that's most active, so it's more likely an app is going to want to be able to get accelerometer data consistently if you're doing some kind of app like that. So setting our delegates, starting the workout session from the health store, and then when that actually starts, we then get this callback, delegate callback, and then here's where we actually start our accelerometer updates. Something we tried originally, I left it in here just so I could point it out. Other thing you can do on the watch to keep your app alive a little bit longer before the OS deactivates it is this perform expiring activity with reason, and you have to pass it a block, and you may or may not execute the entire thing before you get through it. This alone wasn't really enough. We needed the health kit stuff in order to get it to stay awake, but just thought I'd point that out as another thing that if you're trying to do some little last bit of processing before the watch app shuts down, you can use that block in there, and hopefully whatever code you put in there gets used. So here we're starting our accelerometer updates to our queue, and then down here we get the acceleration, which is essentially like a vector 3. Think of the X, Y, and Z planes. I'll go into that in just a second. Updating our labels, and then here is our watch connectivity session where we're sending our message just a comma separated string of X, Y, and Z values. And then so if we go back over to the iPhone end, and we see to here, also something exact same code here to start the watch connectivity session, and then when we actually receive messages, this did receive message delegate callback. We are then checking what's the contents of it, and if we've got the accelerometer data, we're breaking it up into the X, Y, and Z components, and then doing with it what we want after we got that. So I'll jump back into just the accelerometer. Let's go to, oh, I guess it's presented full screen. It's over here. All right, so I'm sure most of you are familiar with the accelerometer, or you know what an accelerometer is, more or less. Just in case, I'm going to just give a brief overview. The way I like to think about it, and it's not too far from the truth, is it's kind of like a box that's suspended by springs on different sides, and based on the acceleration of that box, what direction it's going, it will give you kind of which value that your you know, X, Y, or Z values based on the acceleration in that direction, not the speed, the acceleration. So if we've got so here's kind of a diagram of what it looks like on the iPhone. This is from Apple's documentation from the accelerometer. It's similar to what the watch has, but if you think about the Z-axis is going up and down through the watch, this negative Z, positive Z, X is kind of this left and right with negative X and positive X, and then Y is kind of down and up direction, negative Y, positive Y. And so very similar. So a quick quiz. So all the values, by the way, are reported in terms of G, the acceleration due to gravity. So -1 would be negative G, +1 would be positive G, you know, 9.81 meters per second squared. That's what the units are used that you get back from it. So if the device is lying flat, just with the screen up, what do y'all expect the X, Y, and Z to be?
0, 0, 0, -1.
Yeah. So yeah, you think it would be 0, 0, 0, but you got to remember that gravity's acting on it, so that's pulling it down in the zero direction, the negative Z direction. So you get flat and -1. So -1 because of gravity. So this next slide is really going to flatter David in his drawing abilities. You probably didn't know I put this in here. But so using that kind of information, so there's no watch gesture recognizer that we could find that was like built into iOS or anything like that. So we kind of had to come up with our own system for, you know, how we're going to interpret these accelerometer values. So instead of, we didn't want to get too complicated though, because we were just kind of doing a rough demo. And so instead of like trying to think about, oh, you know, what is, you know, the movement component, just think about what is the watch giving us in various positions. So if your wrist is, put this back on. If your wrist is here, what's the value? If it's here, what's the value? If it's up here, what's the value? You know, so we kind of just did some measurements there, and they pretty much went in line with what we expected from knowing how the different axes are. But if you're using that as your way of recognizing gestures instead of actually using pure acceleration, the problem you'll run into is like this is going to look the exact same as this. Like if you're just sitting here, it's going to look the exact same. So you're just not moving here. I mean, there's a acceleration that happens when you're moving, but if you're just sitting here, this looks like the exact same value as this does. So we couldn't do anything like this unless we wanted to get a little more fancy. So we wanted to just get some simple values working. Just for this, kind of you're going up, the X tilts back, or the X tilts forward, or the Y tilts left, or the Y tilts right, or you know all the way up, and you know, to, you know, +1 or -1, depending on those different values. And then what you saw me doing at the beginning when I was trying to get the drone to work was flipping, and that made our Z flip from being -1 in this position to being +1. That's what we used the trigger to actually make the takeoff command happen. So how does it look like in the code? So after we've gotten the accelerometer values, the X, Y, and Z components from the watch, Again, it happens every 0.3 seconds or so. We kind of came up with our own little gesture recognizer class and drone states. These different states where we're kind of put together based on the different commands we wanted to send. So there's the hover state, taking off or land with the same thing. So if you wanted to land again, you would also flip your wrist over. Forward and backward, climb, descend, left roll, right roll. And so based on this state, that's what we knew what commands to send over to the drone. And then, so then we have this method here. So the text state with X, Y, and Z that takes in the X value, the Y value, and Z value of the accelerometer. And we have a few different cases that all return the drone state that we want based on those values. So if you're thinking about descend here, for example, descend, we have the arm facing straight down. And so in that case, X being the left, right, this component is facing down. So it's actually at +1. Y in this case, because it's not being tilted this way at all, is near 0. And Z is again near 0, because remember Z was -1 here, +1 here. So in this case, it would be near 0. So that gave us the descend state, hover being here, and climb being what X is -1 instead of 1. And then, so we also had, if I go back to this real quick. We essentially decided just to break it down between the different regions. So if it was a negative, positive, or 0, that's all we cared about. Like, no care how negative or how positive. So we wanted to have some sort of cutoff. So like if it's here at 0, like where at what point should it then be considered positive? So we kind of had a little precision, or I guess accuracy value that we defined up here as 0.25. And when we use that to determine if we're in the kind of the positive region, the 0 region, or the negative region. So if we're, for example, looking at X here, and if we calculate the region, so if the value that we're inputting is less than precision, but it's greater than negative precision, so this is, if it's less than 2.5 or greater than -2.5, then it's 0. Otherwise, if it's less than -2.5, then we're going to return negative. If it's greater than 2.5, we'll return positive. So based on those three criteria, we then determine if the X is in positive, negative, or 0 region, Y, Z similarly. And so using those different states, and using that chart over here that we came up with, is how we then determine these if statements to determine what drone state you got. And then I'm not going to go too much into the Parrot SDK. Y'all can take a look at that, and but just to show you how that then translates to what we do based on the state that we get returned from that. There's a few different. There's again just another big if else if statements here, where we've got so if the new state that we detect is forward, then we'll go to hover. Hover basically resets all the flags on the Parrot drone. That flags meaning like the pitch, the yaw, the roll, etc. And then we'll do this pitch forward touchdown, which then sends the MiniDrone the correct flag based on what we're doing. So in this case, we're setting the pitch to go about half speed forward. And similarly for the other, these are all in IB actions because there's also, if you look at the Parrot SDK example code, they have a little touch interface for phone to use to mess around with it. And yeah, so similarly for all the different, so changing your yaw, changing your roll, all these have their own values that you set in the Parrot SDK. It's been updated since we've done this code, so it's going to look a little bit different. They've cleaned it up a little bit. You can tell this is kind of a little ugly looking, with all these arrows and stuff and C code. But they've made their Objective-C wrapper a little bit nicer since we've done this. Yeah, I think that's it there. Let me go back here. So in conclusion, it was a lot of fun. I'm sad that we lost the propeller, and of course, when I was checking it 10 minutes before this, it was working just fine. But that will happen with demos, it seems like sometimes. But we learned a little bit more about what's possible with watchOS and the Parrot iOS SDK, and occasionally you may have hit someone with a drone, which of course is always a lot of fun too in its own regard. Yeah, any questions or any, yeah.
Will this work with either the first generation or second generation full-size Parrot drone?
No. So we actually did try we actually bought the second generation AR drone at first, and they have essentially discontinued their support for the software on it. Is that
Yeah, so the AR drone, it doesn't work with the new SDK. But the Bebop drone, I think does work. So that's like the other Parrot drone.
Yeah, the Bebop drone is basically their AR drone 3.0. So it's, if you see Bebop, Parrot Bebop, that's their new drone. Yeah. But of course with the latest SDK. Yep.
Are all of the gestures you can control with just the instantaneous state, or are there any things that require a duration, like a...
No, so that's what I meant at the beginning. We were making it super simple, so it's literally just the only acceleration that's happening in every case is gravity. So if if I hold my wrist this way or this way, the only acceleration that's happening that we're getting from the accelerometer is gravity based on that. Now you could be a little bit make it a little more complex and actually implement real gestures like this means something or this means something, but we just took it real simple, just different positions for the watch.
How long were you able to keep the session open, like using that health kit running indefinitely?
Yes. Draining.
I wanted to like record always, but my watch would shut off because I was using audio recording session.
Yeah, and it's a little finicky, like because I the first time I tried it, it's like, bam, it worked. Like I just created a health kit session, a workout session. And then it just worked. And then I tried it again some days later, and just all of a sudden my screen shut off, and it would just I started getting data from it. Best I can tell, from what I was doing wrong, or I'm not actually sure that Apple intended for.
They don't want long running.
I don't think this is the intended behavior. So we may be taking advantage of a bug, because they have in their documentation, and I've seen elsewhere, is that what should happen is when you're getting this accelerometer data in the background, is the watch will keep storing all those accelerometer values that it's been getting. But then once you like activate the app again, it'll send them all at once, and so you'll get a history of the data. But I'm getting it live, and but I did run into a case where it worked once and then stopped working after that. The best I can tell that what made the difference there was one, making sure I cleaned up the workout session, making sure it was always stopped, because that first time we ran it, like we started it, but we never called any code to stop it. And then I actually had to went and create and then I could never get it to go again. So I created a different bundle ID and went in and made sure that I had that cleanup code after that to make sure that it was actually ended. Then the other thing was, when I was trying to, I got a quick and dirty working with just initializing the health kit store and everything. It's like, okay, I'm going to go through the process of also, asking for permission for health kit stuff and doing that stuff. But even though we weren't writing any data to it, I was going to go through that whole flow, and so I added that in. But then And again, I don't know if this was due to the session cleanup issue or if it was because of this, but after I started asking for permission for stuff, or for, that be
Yeah.
in order to write to HealthKit, even though we don't have any data to write to it because we're not doing a workout app, to write or read from it. Once I started doing that, then it stopped working as well. It's something bizarre. That's why I think it must be some kind of, it could be anyway, some kind of bug. But I'm not sure that, again, I'm not sure if it was that or if it was the not cleaning up the session. So you may have to experiment with both.
Are there any pre-programmed gestures in WatchKit, like the flip-on or something, that it would recognize the way we have UI gesture recognizers for touchscreen?
Not that I found. Obviously Apple has something because they use it for being able to watch screen turns on when you face towards it, or faces off when I turn towards you. But I didn't find anything. I don't think we found anything. We were looking at that. That'd be great if they did. But yeah.
And what's it like to pilot a drone with your arm for extended periods of time with
It does get tiring. It does get tiring. We were at a place at a high school, Westlake High School, doing a little demo and for some of the kids there, and so I was doing that for 30 minutes. So my arm was getting a little tired. Definitely not the most comfortable thing to do. Anything else? Yeah.
Did you use test-driven development to develop this project?
No. This was just kind of something David and I hacked together in a couple days. Like we did a few different sessions, but no.
Okay, so it took you only a few days to develop this, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, like I said, there's a Parrot SDK which takes care of all the communication with the drone for you, and then we just had to figure out the accelerometer capturing, sending the accelerometer value to the phone, then interpreting the values so we could send the right command to the drone. Yep.
Is the drone using Wi-Fi or the Bluetooth? Or?
It's using Bluetooth.
Okay.
So it's connected up to the phone via Bluetooth, as is your watch, of course.
And what did you find your range to be?
I think they advertise the Bluetooth standard, like I don't know, something like 50 meters or something, but we didn't fly it around too far, but we could get a good distance away from us, like halfway across the cafeteria or further, like just as we were messing around with it.
And then, like, some of their other drones use Wi-Fi.
That's true. Yeah, some of their this is like the cheapest one they sell, but they have the bigger ones. I guess have Wi-Fi and may also have some ability to do like waypoints and GPS and all that kind of stuff. But,
Any support for like gracefully landing if the connection gets dropped or if the app quits?
No. Okay. We didn't do anything.
Would it keep doing what it was doing?
Yes.
So it could.
So actually people have talked about this before, just with if you've heard of any horror stories with even like this exact drone. If you go look on Amazon reviews, the kids who opened it like Christmas morning, and the first thing that happened was they took it outside and they let it go and just kept going up, kept going, and then there's some way to set set like a maximum height, so that it won't do that, but it's not on by default for some reason. So a lot of people lost their drones the first day when that happened.
Awesome.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks, Matt. So we're gonna go see if we can find the propeller, and if we do, then we'll come back and do a demo. Meanwhile, I wanted to let anyone if anyone has any announcements they want to share with the group, wanted to leave some time for that. If anyone has announcements, yes.
I'm a newbie at the iPhone development thing. I started doing it about 5 years ago and then got sidetracked with other things. And I just last week got a new Mac Mini loaded up so I can do it again. But part of the motivation for that was that a friend of mine put me in touch with an attorney who is interested in developing an iPhone app, and I'm obviously more of a facilitator than a code hacker on this particular kind of thing. So I'm looking for people who are interested in maybe getting involved with this. This app is going to require some things like communications with a back-end database that collects data, large amounts of data, and the revenue stream is actually intended to come from generating reports based on data in the database and selling that to people. I'm not going to say a whole lot more because I don't want to get in trouble with the person who's doing it, but it will also require an interface that is engaging to people so that they will submit data, and so basically she's just really getting started at this. She doesn't even have a website yet. She has a domain name that she's parked at a hosting company, but if anybody's interested in possibly learning more about this and getting involved in it, let me know.
Cool. All right, so we've got another 40 minutes of time until they kick us out of here, so we can network and get to know other people here in Austin. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, it's time to color.
I wonder if it fell off prior to hitting there, and then that's why it.
Yeah, it could be.
I contacted David. Go out.
You should have JoJo bring the one that we're gonna shoot tomorrow with the bebop.
Oh, thank you.
There was cake yesterday.
Oh my God, that's fair. It crashed into that guy, right? I mean, because he checked his pockets. Well, when you first started, when David was doing it, when it originally crashed into that dude right there.
Yeah, might have.
What was your name?
Good job.
Thank you. Nobody laughed at my
Part of
jokes,
the
but
life.
computer science grad, so couldn't be too
That's
much.
cool that they have an SDK for that.
I did a couple times to my dog. Liked it. It's very interesting.
What like? I'm glad that worked out well with Logic.
I have a couple questions. Since y'all work in the iOS development industry, I work as a Java developer, generally. I was getting into iOS development. How'd y'all get y'all started? How did y'all get started in professional iOS development? I've got a few things on my own, but I try to use it as like a resume building tool more than anything. I've yet to really venture out.
So you've already got like Apple developer account and all that?
I got like 8 apps and apps.
Then I think you're like 100% on your way.
From there, I started off doing a contract. Actually with Parrot Mobile. But yeah, so that was the first professional thing, right? Once you get paid, from there, Did a lot, got a lot of features on the app, learned stuff on the job.
They hired you?
Yeah. It was really just
Yeah, I mean, I would say just, startups are great place to start, like AngelList.co. Yeah, have a really nice GitHub.
Is that you put everything?
Yeah. Well, or Bitbucket. Yeah, I mean, so that, you can link to it in your profile or your resume, and then they can go look at your
We're hiring kind of, maybe not like this month, but pretty soon we'll hire
yeah, you can find us an AngelList, I think. So.
Or just go to directly to our website.
Right.
Yeah.
I've been there before.
Anthony's actually in charge of hiring and he's on here.
Steven.
Yes.
I was hoping to see him meet up with him and discuss that. I've got several frameworks in one app right now, but it's just waterfall. One phase,
Yeah, so it seems the best thing to do is use Google's thing. Yeah. Like Google and figure out who the second best one is. Google will figure it out.
On Facebook, he was telling me, when he was presenting, he said, "It's a bad document." So I reached out to him. We were supposed to meet up, but I had some stuff that happened, so I had to take care of that. Since then, been delayed with that. Well, I'm Cameron.
Nice to meet you.
What's your name?
David.
David?
Carroll.
Nice to meet you all. See y'all.
Yeah. Good luck.
That's my email, yes. So are you on Meetup? Yes, if you get
I know, yeah, I really have no idea. Yeah, it was here, right? I mean, he was practicing it.
I just gotta show you.
It was there.
Yeah, I have mine. An hour. No, too bad.
Right, I think Jojo already ordered one. No, it just really bothers me. Where the hell could it have gone? I think it got stuck to the guy. It's over there. He's gonna find it later, like in a couple. Because we crashed it, like.
It's like before we even started, David crashed.
So it's all live.
You're at Jack Okay. We never actually talked about it. I'm only here, I live out in Florida. So commuting is not the most fun thing. So I'll only pop in a couple days.
I'm not in Florida, so I kind of opposite way.
Yeah.
Hi. Yeah. I have this country and like background that I can take you with. And you just
Are you interested in programming at all, or? Yeah, campus. Oh, really?
It was cool.
Have you done any?
Yeah.
I've done a little bit.
That's tough. Yeah, we really gotta work like that.
Oh my God! You should help me.
That one, I know the basics, you know, but we actually, so we also mentioned something that's basically next Tuesday. Yeah, it's just gonna be like open, like everybody just kind of gets
Yeah, because I have no idea. I'm just Googling. So I should probably like learn. Go to about me a book.
Computer science, we never do.
I have no idea. Yeah, like why is this pen not going? My dad does electrically, so I've texted him like literally pictures of my thing and like, what do I do, Dad? And he's like, well, do you have all this? And I'm like, no, I don't have any of that. Soldering iron. I'm like, what's that? Oh, really? I think this new Bluetooth module that I bought is solder, so I might need it. Maybe
they're like
Yeah, problem with those are usually like older or stable for those. So you might want something that can hold it. And also something that like a sponge thing that you can like go. In the past life, I did
Yeah, I don't know how I got such a
I'll bring it. Just remind me.
I'm really glad I did. I was a little bit nervous.
Yours was way better than mine. Put it that way.
I feel like I cursed yours because I said that I hoped that he would hit somebody with the drone and then everybody would forget about my drone. Sorry. Yeah. It's gonna drive me nuts.
Yeah, I have no idea where it went.
I want it to be like stuck to the drone.
They're doing some more, like some more like plays, but that'll be over there.
I can't believe how fast it came off.
I mean, they like just pop on and like this thing's like this whole thing's like meant to like fall apart.
Yeah.
Because they expect you to crack everything.
Yeah.
Because like all this, like all those like fighting things, they just like it's like comes to. So one time I really thought it broke the drone. Was like this whole half that was off, and then like two propellers were off, and I was like, oh sure. Like right before another one, but then it's like popped back into place.
Yeah.
And they just took off.
I guess that makes sense. Pretty durable. I mean, it had to have fallen off over there, right? Because you were like, it was tangled in the cords.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, man, you definitely gotta check out that simulator. I actually, I think last week, you had issues with like, you're not issues, you're messing up or something. Or an app that I think it was yeah. Still debating.
It was in the
That's really hard to find a black.
Yeah.
Just in case it wasn't code errors, I'm actually fine.
David still, well, if you have problems, David still connects to it?
Yeah, I don't think he is, because right now it's saying that's what I wondered at first. It just flew off.
Oh, okay. off. And is it that same thing that that's what I was gonna work on. I don't want to deal with taking all that out. Well, I mean, I want to do it. It's just like that. It's like, I'll leave it. Plus, like, all you want to
plan. This is a she's got an LLC, which, you know, they turn around.
I found it.
Did you find it?
Uh-huh. It was stuck in the folds of this thing.
Oh, straight.
They're back. I might be sending too many updates. Like you really like the way we did it. You really have to keep your arm like pretty straight and like pretty exact. It's like you're trying to like half-ass it this way.
Yeah, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I know. I was just like, what about the phone?
Yeah. I know, so it's I'm like, I'm really quiet in the office. I feel like I'm oh, I know. That's like something gets here.
Right.
Collecting data that's
Great demo. Yeah. There we go. It feels so bad. I feel like I cursed it.
Well, enough people stuck around and saw it.
Well, I was so nervous about mine. I hoped to hit somebody with it, and then everybody would forget about mine. You know, whatever I did. So I feel like I cursed it. Yeah, that's true. That's why I did as well. This is parent shoes that the fitness hack, you know, that I was talking about. Like, Matt, David, developers, and Jack Rabbit. I can't remember, have you done any iOS, or usually mostly like web stuff?
But I was here with my friend
graphics for
So great. You know, if there's any sponsors for next week or
Nope, not set up yet.
okay, great. So this time, yeah, now that I'm actually here, I'm gonna say great. Great. And yeah, we'll do a little quick presentation. I was not my forte, but no, I plug it into and so yeah, I will make sure to do so.
I think people would actually be interested in it too, so you don't need to make it quick. You can, you don't want to take it time. I think people will.
Yeah, definitely. And like, I mean, like, so he told me, like, make sure you do the voice, because that's what it's gonna turn or essentially, like, control the nice quality and top of the and so,
You baited it.
make sure to do that.
Oh god, he's like staring at me with the eyes.
Yeah, that noise always scares me when it takes off.
Because, like, if you, yeah, it will freak you out. out, right? Because you like turn above or below, like this.
Yeah, because it has
You like mess up the airflow, like and the sensor
So yeah, now that you talk about it, I want to do an actual like gesture recognizer with like movement.
Yeah, no, I didn't think about it at first because like I was thinking like I had forgotten that it was all about acceleration. Like the rate, like I don't know why it didn't dawn on me why this was the same as this. Like I don't know why that didn't. Like I understand why it didn't dawn on me. I think about like wait a second. I'm sure we have readings between gear and gear like that we could use as something, and then you could really feel like you're using the force, like in move the drone with your minds or something.
I know there's some drone out there that has like there's some kind of wall, and just wherever you point it is where it goes. Like I saw like videos and I was like that's sweet. However they figured that out.
Have you seen like the drone racing videos?
I've seen some of them. I don't know the same ones, but yeah, they're pretty crazy. Like these ones were like in the woods and stuff, and they're just like dodging trees and like that's insane.
The HTC Vive VR headset, it has motion tracked sensors. They're like 1 millimeter precision, and so they use 2 radar discs to see exactly where the controllers are. And so you could like put the camera feed like into the goggles, and then you can control it like a bike almost, like using your hands.
Hey, pretty sweet.
So I'm just gonna get an HTC Vive.
We're getting one, aren't we?
JoJo's
getting one?
Yeah, they went on sale today.
Oh yeah, they're super powerful computer. Or like pretty powerful. Daniel said he's gonna bring his or something though, I think.
Yeah, Vive is amazing. Like they during South by I did a demo and like you put on the headset and you can see the motion track controllers in the headset, and like the person that like helps you like hand them to you, I can just like I had the headset on, but I could just like grab them from her hand because they were in VR.
But like, and you can't see your own hand.
No, but you can't see your own hand. But you can like grab stuff.
That's so bizarre.
And then you can like paint stuff in VR. Like it was like 3D painting where you can like in the air, and then you can like walk through it and get it from the other side.
Oh, that's pretty straight. That's really
I just saw a video today of a little kid wearing it, and there was like a table in the VR and like stuff on the table, and he was like reaching over, and he just like
falls off. I think that was like a Reddit post or something.
That's a real testament to like how immersive it is. Like you can really get that into it, where you can just kind of like almost lose sense that that's awesome.
Especially for like little kids.
Yeah.
I know. I think pretty soon people are gonna be building houses with a dedicated VR room. Like, cause you need just like a small room that you can put like props in.
Every kid's gonna want the room under.
But now the Oculus, you don't actually walk around with though, right? It's only the Vive.
Well, and the Vive is like connected to your phone, so you can't really walk that far.
Right, but there is some tether there. But the Oculus can't. There is no motion control or anything like that. I think it's just you use like a game controller.
But I think it does have like I think it has like some kind of sensors in the actual headset to where I think they might have some other sensor that can like see where your head is. That's exactly how it works. But it's got like these little, I think Verge did a review of it, and like in the he'd seen like the infrared camera, you can see the dots on it. So it has like some kind of infrared dots. Like it uses.
It's really fancy. How's like you said you tried the HTV Vive is what you tried. How's like the depth or what am I thinking? Not depth field, like peripheral on that. Like, is it pretty wrap around or is it very much like just in the center of your?
It's definitely the most wraparound that I've seen. So more than the Gear VR. I haven't actually done the Oculus yet. More than the Gear VR. Definitely more than the cardboard.
Yeah. So the only one I really tried was like essentially it wasn't a Google cardboard thing, but it was essentially that. So I haven't really tried any like nicer ones yet.
Yeah.
It was like
I was lucky enough to try this a few years ago. My friend had access to it, and I was like, just loved it. I was like, so cool. It was like a roller coaster where I got kind of dizzy from inside. That was sick. And like that one game I thought you mentioned about was like you have to put your hands on the desk and like get these things like pop at you. Like the whole point of the game is that you don't your head's don't do the desk. And there's like rabbits coming in and swinging stuff not again. I really hate being startled and stuff, just like how do I put my hands on the desk.
When is the new Oculus coming out for sale?
It's already for sale. They shipped them already.
You guys see that, like, the CEO, I think, hand-delivered the first one or something like that?
Oh, yeah, I saw
Like, flew to Alaska. It's like, it's cool, but it's also just funny because it's so, like, unintuitive. You know, the guy's like, I don't even know if you realize, like, who the guy was at first. He's just kind of like, thanks, yeah. I was gonna have HoloLens there, right?
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's really cool.
They just started shipping those too. They're $3,000.
That's without any computer, like you still need a separate computer, right? I think.
Yes. I have no idea. I'm not sure. But yeah,
It's crazy.
But it's AR. So
Yeah, it's kind of cool in its own way too. Though. It's different, but I see
And they have this thing called hollow portation, where you can set up like 2 identical rooms in different places, and you can like see the person. You can see the person in your room.
It's crazy.
It like records them with a camera in your room, and you can see them in your room, like sitting next to you.
That's pretty wild.
And then you can like also make them smaller and bigger. And you can record things too, so you can like watch them later.
That's pretty cool. I saw they had those like use cases where you know, like you'd be like fixing like a light or something, and then another person can like sit and draw like on your wall or something, and like as you move your head, it like sticks to like multiple locations. I always thought that was cool.
That's what Christine does over at Capitol Tower, but they use Google Glass. So they use it for like medical purposes. They were a capital factory company, but they use it for, so if a surgeon is doing surgery in California, a better surgeon in New York can watch them and like draw on their screen like, this is the artery, whatever, I don't know. That makes you
Hopefully it's a little more detailed
yeah.
than that.
This is the head.
Cut here. But they do it for medical stuff, and then like machinery that need like more experienced techs and stuff to fix. So, like, instead of flying them over, like they do that with the big tractor company or whatever it's called, big yellow ones, Caterpillar. They have Caterpillar, and so big technicians that have like specific jobs, so it has to be flown across the country. You can just kind of interesting, but yeah, it's gonna be even better with like AR stuff.
Yeah, I've got a little brother who's like, he's less than half my age, so he's 10, and I showed him that Minecraft demo, I don't know if you guys saw that, with the, basically like in your living room, like on your coffee table, like all these blocks are there, and I don't know, I still think you can't interact with it, like it doesn't have the capability to track your hands, but like, I guess it's something that's on their like short list of features, and like, he's obsessed with it already, like his other video, like totally wants to do that, and like, build that, and it's really cool, you know, you can have like pouring water on that.
Next big thing. Everyone should be a Unity developer now. We're renaming it Austin Unity Developers.
Everyone just comes in one day, hey guys, so we're all shifting gears, it's just decided to be made.
Have you ever seen a UK show called Black Mirror? You've seen it? Have you seen the episode? Like he was talking about recording like your VR experience. Have you seen the episode where they have like the eye or the contact or something like that that records all their experiences, and like so they can go like rewind and watch like previous parts of their lives, like overanalyze everything. It's kind of like the whole show is like around like every episode's like a different like dystopian future type of concept. In this case, it was like being able to record every moment of your life, and then actually being able to go back and like look at it. So like looking at like
That's gonna happen.
Looking at like little behaviors that like someone else did, like your girlfriend did, or like something like that may have tipped you off that they're cheating on you, or there's something like and then being able to see other people's recordings.
Yeah.
And then like, that's like.
Hold on, my dad is watching the feed and he wants me to wait.
Hi, Caroline's dad.
Sorry, continue.
No, that was it. That was just the recording thing just reminded me of that.
It's definitely super weird. I feel like it's one of those things that's like, the only thing stopping us is like a few tiny technical things. Like somebody's gonna come out with glasses and just has
Are
a
you
camera
done
on
with
it.
the drone?
Don't worry about it. I heard it spin for a couple seconds, but I didn't see.
Yeah, we found the propeller, so we can put it back on there. And,
Yeah, I mean, it can do anything that the drone can normally do, right? Just with your hands.
pretty much, yeah. Like so, being able to go up, down, left, right, forward, backwards.
Can you connect multiple drones?
Synchronize them? I don't know.
Is like the SDK kind of limited to one at a time?
Yeah, their example project is like it's only one at a time, but it's not clear whether like there's a limitation or not.
I mean, iOS can connect to multiple.
Yeah, you can connect to multiple Bluetooth devices easily, but I don't know if their SDK supports it or if you could modify it to do that.
Attach one watch to one drone and have that watch control another drone, so they never really change.
Yeah.
You have 100 drones each direction.
Like you're conducting an orchestra. Exactly.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that'd actually be really cool.
That would be really awesome.
Just like wired up to some features like this. And
it'd be like the fountains of the Bellagio.
I use it to
How many drones have you picked up?
Yeah, or like a little chihuahua. Hi.
See ya.
Yeah, these can like barely pick up a like what did we put on there, like a granola bar? Like you can pick up one, not two.
And it didn't like so like when I had it here, it like sounds it doesn't like disturb the airflow or anything.
Yeah.
That's a good question. We did hang it underneath and it did still work. Right?
Yeah, it's so fluid. It had to like correct itself a lot. Like it kind of get really shaky, and then it would kind of have to figure out how to correct itself.
I didn't realize the top's like a Lego thing. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it actually comes with like a little Lego guy, so you can put like
That'd be cool if it was like, I don't know, it's like half an idea, but like, instead of like constant control, just like that's like one more notch to the left.
It is
and
called
like,
the
go opposite
cargo.
way,
You
it's
think
like
it'd be able to carry
stop or
something? You think you'd be able to carry
Kind of like
something?
dial almost.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it means.
There's
A granola.
Felt right.
So how often does this happen?
Every first Tuesday of every month. First Tuesday of every month.
Are there any other iPhone or iOS groups around?
Yes, there's the Cocoa Coders group, and I think they've got a meetup every 2 weeks.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Great presentation.
But at least half of them are up north, so like Round Rock area.
Yeah, Cocoa Coder is usually up north, I think.
But they've had like probably like last year they probably had like 6 or 7 here at Capital Factory. So they do.
Do they meet more frequently, like 2 weeks?
Yeah, I think. Well, most of the time it's every 2 weeks, but sometimes there's none for a few weeks.
Okay. Yeah. Just based on Carroll.
Yeah, but they're really good. Like, and they're always like focused on just like deep diving into one framework on iOS, or like they did like a 3D Touch one. They did like a multi-peer connectivity, stuff like that.
Yeah, I go to that one pretty regularly. It's really good. Yeah, it's like yeah, exactly what you said. Like random topics that don't get a lot of coverage. They'll go pretty deep into it. So it's a good way to learn about it really fast.
It sounds like you'd be really lucky if they did your thing there. Like,
They're pretty good about it. I mean, plus there's always like it's kind of open discussion. There's always like oh, what problems are you having thing as well. So kind of
It's kind of like WWDC type of thing, where
Yeah,
it's like
something like
session, which was cool because we don't have that here.
Is it always Carl giving the presentation, or it's
Pretty much.
pretty
always,
much?
yeah. The one
Well,
here.
but he's really
The one
good.
here,
Yeah, he's awesome.
okay, well, thanks all so much.
Yeah,
Yeah.
thanks
Cool.
for coming.
Nice meeting you.
Yeah, thanks for presenting. Yeah.
Seeing you guys.
For this guy, actually. You said you used Syncano for something?
I do. Yeah.
Hi, Carol. Nice to see you again.
For what? And how?
So I use it for.
My
We have chat functionality and one of my clients, and
did recently just
basically the way it's so basically all the socket stuff is abstracted away, which is really nice. We basically just implement the SDK.
What?
Some people have to see
I know, yeah, and if David should write anything that we found it, and later in the video you can see it's really big.
What's the like?
Yeah, it's not a big deal.
I keep forgetting to tell David that even up against that
Yeah,
wall,
so it's a
he's got, like,
premium.
chalk.
Technically, it's like
Well, he
3,
earlier
4
had
$5
chalk.
but
can see some
even
lights
then,
in
it's
there.
only $25 a month. So
Yeah,
it's,
look
you
at
know,
that
it's
like randomly. We
you really want to
need to
probably
get random
like
also
Mostly,
like
I
on
want
the
to be able to
paper
learn
to do or something on it, and I guess on my
coding
on my side, and I'll find it later. It's like,
Yeah.
why is that?
How many
Plus, they're so
people
small right
are
now.
doing
So
it?
like, you can
Yeah.
very easily access their engineers almost any time. Like anytime we have a problem,
Okay, well, I'm
I'll
full
fix
back
that
on
within
tomorrow
5
in the
minutes. So
morning.
they're actually hang on.
Good.
It's like the rest of the engineers will be in the state with all
I don't think there's anything else that you need to know.
Right now,
Or I think just
You're not blocked at all by me testing that user stuff?
Yeah, that was
No.
the highlight.
Okay.
Theirs are really good. There's certain things that
I just need to
weird,
like do the
this
user
was
the
so
user
frustrating. This is my
generation
first experience, and they've been a lot
stuff.
better since.
So I'm
I
trying to
like
fix
this
that.
certain things like
Okay.
was
like generating the code.
I messaged them.
Yeah,
I think
so,
the
hey, so this
right now I'm
I was like, hey, this
I need
is
to double check
there's
again,
a,
but I think you can actually
like
create
a
users
user
with cloud code.
that's not supposed to be in the
I think it
documentation.
has to be created.
Like,
Also,
it's just
there's
an
also
awesome
free-
feature.
Oh, really?
They let me know in like
Every
2
year.
minutes.
There's
And,
you can create a user like manually in the database.
Officially released it.
From like,
Well, there is a sign up form for cloud code. Maybe you could fake one.
So
Yeah, just send the password and email.
it's very well funded and all
Pre-populated.
that. They were kind of offering with stuff.
Maybe I could still do that.
And then, you know,
I've
March,
used the JavaScript.
okay,
Well,
it's time to go.
I've used the
Yeah,
JavaScript
so even though it's
SDK
like
to
half
create a
when
user.
they do the switch, they weren't
Wasn't technically cloud code, but
Cloud code is like
it is
like their
JavaScript.
JavaScript and the cloud code look exactly the same with
Yeah.
the APIs and
So I'm
everything.
not
So it's
sure.
like, so what I'm actually doing, maybe we should have just done the username and password.
Yeah, exactly.
But
It's
they
a little
actually gave us
weird because
One
like
thing
if someone
I
like
mean,
logs
like,
out,
you know, do a
like
side
sessions
project
go,
with it.
and the way you like
We,
become an
designed
user
that
in the
for small
system is that they
projects
become
also.
a session token.
Yeah.
Like it's a session token. You don't like become. You don't call like this become.
So we're always trying to
Like you know that user. So when someone's entering a code, what I basically have to do is log in to that
I
user,
get paid for that too, but
which creates a session, and then pass the session back to the app.
But then I do
Yeah, that's
functions.
janky.
And I think the whole thing should probably take
Hey, it
like
works
30
fine.
But yeah, I mean, I
But
guess
it's-
it's-
but
So you
It's
said you're
basically
Dell,
two
right?
yeah,
minutes.
maybe yeah, because it's only because it's only tricky because
And now,
parse requires
you
passwords.
do
Then you
this full time.
require passwords
Yeah.
for like doing sign up.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Then that would just
Oh, like, that's
take
a lot of
away
potential.
Yeah.
all that. I mean, there is like the anonymous users, but then they have like
There-
restricted
you can't-
access.
and
So
you
I
can't-
can't do
But that's
that.
like-
That's
So-
for the startup call. I did that, and I just used the username as a password originally.
Yeah.
Since they didn't have email, and I didn't want to do for some reason I didn't want to do anonymous. I can't remember why.
My initial idea for like promotion.
Yeah,
Oh,
there's-
because you can't re-log back into your anonymous.
Yeah, there's like really weird restrictions and
Yeah.
stuff like yeah.
Maybe they'll come out with some different stuff for that.
Yeah, but now it's like open source, there could be a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah, I went ahead
um,
and translated a couple of my apps
yeah,
from
sweet.
Objective-C
So yeah, just take a look at that and give me a chance tomorrow and
Yeah.
Another app I
let
had,
me know
this
if
is
it works.
well,
And
the
hopefully
main
I'll
one
have
to start with is they do something
yeah, not long.
a small part of that.
Have you
Doesn't
found
matter
like
what's out.
any
We can
Alrighty.
donate. One of the things we
good
talked about
summary of
is using the Apple TV
how to
SDK so that you know
Sounds
correctly
good.
funders and
Congrats.
they just have like a stream on one TV.
congrats.
So like,
No, seriously, dude, you didn't look like nervous.
like
Oh,
you
good.
are in a soccer game,
Yeah.
it's
Once
on TV set
once
on the
it
screen.
starts, it's
Some people don't necessarily want to tweet this
No,
out
I
every
mean,
morning by morning or
It looked very well
Facebook.
Yeah.
You have an optional.
exactly.
And
So
it
you
goes
go
up.
to
I thought going
this
in.
thing,
Yeah.
usually like if you don't,
Yeah,
if it
so-
doesn't know the,
Oh,
if the
very
type
cool.
isn't obvious, you say like,
You didn't have
ask
bubbles
question
flying
if
all
it
over
was,
the
you know,
Get to
Yeah.
You
I know, I was showing it to my dad the other day and it crashed.
do all
I
your
was
work
like,
with
"Oh."
like
AM,
or
Yeah,
the
Dad,
other
I'm a
side
reprogrammer.
statement.
We should go out lunch
Or you
sometime.
can do
I'd love
like
to hear more about the
guard
product,
Yeah.
see what's going on.
Well, females does the radio all, especially.
That also carefully unwraps.
Any of the other engineering besides
And then you say else.
computer science, like,
Yeah.
it's like you can't like get stuff wrong.
Yeah.
Like it's like unlike software, which I guess
No, I got
people
you,
are
man.
careless because you can go and fix it.
Well, yeah,
That's
just
probably why
I'll
people
just
sometimes don't think computer science is real engineering.
Yeah,
But
super tough anyway, but.
Yeah.
I do sometimes wish
I did
that
that a bunch
Actually,
of
there was a little
you
bit
know,
more.
networking things.
I personally, I'm super guilty
Oh,
of
yeah,
that.
it's
Being
same.
like, you know,
Okay,
Yeah.
once I parse this,
Fix it.
Jason, let's.
Yeah, no, for
if
sure.
let
We'll do
this
something because
equals-
that sounds
you
cool.
can't build software like we do for like the space station.
Same.
Right,
Like that.
right.
Like, you have to be
Right.
much more
See you guys.
perfect.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Okay.
Anyway.
Yeah, I thought like that seems kind of like overkill to do that, but I guess that's the right way to do it.
It is technically the right way, and it does make you, I think, a better programmer, and sometimes if you're
Well,
gonna be like really
yeah.
cautious about, okay,
Like the-
this is supposed to be
Oh,
this.
Well, yeah, luckily we finally got it working after.
And sometimes
It's funny,
if
the
it's
propeller
like a
gets stuck in the
resource
folds
that you
and stuff.
have.
Yeah, which
something
like,
that's
you can't see it 'cause
really
it's black, the black propeller, so it's like.
And there's, you can just force unravel
What's
with
the,
the exclamation point.
Yeah.
Like
The
if it's your
time
own,
range
if you're
on this,
passing around.
20 minutes or
Like
less?
five
Something
minutes,
that's
like battery life.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
that's what I meant.
Yeah, it's like, it's only about 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Anyway.
That's like one of my biggest
Making it
hesitations in
optional and
like
then
putting money
carefully
into
unwrapping it
this.
if you
Yeah.
know for sure it's gonna
There
always
are
be
bigger
there.
ones, I don't know how good.
That's also a way
battery
to
life
do
they
it,
get,
is
so
that
these all
lots
the
of
small
bags,
ones you see,
they
like
call
this
them,
size and smaller,
exclamation point.
just they just don't have the battery to last
Do you-
very long.
do you
Yeah, so
use
we
it when
we
you're,
just
like-
started talking to them about that
Like daily
yesterday.
life ever?
Oh, cool.
No.
And so
I
I
this
think
is not
by the
mine
end of
either,
this
it's
week
like-
we'll like
Okay,
kind of
fair.
figure it out
But-
exactly.
Like that buy one, I
make
wanna,
sure
like,
that they're
make
cool
use
with
of
the
it.
feature
I
list
just
that
don't
we
know
have
how.
there,
Yeah.
and then also
Unless I go on like vacation and
kind
like,
of confirming that
so
they
like
don't
see the
have like
scenery or
some,
something, but like, I don't know.
or kind of figuring out if they have
Yeah,
some
it
kind of
seems like the
existing
only
RCP system
real
that we
like
can
daily
integrate
use
with.
cases to record
But then once we
you.
figure those
Yeah.
two things out, we
It's
just
so nice.
Shoot cool videos.
Yeah,
It's just
shoot
cool
videos.
videos,
That's pretty
yeah.
much all.
I made a
It's really
Swift
good.
wrapper for ChipKit. Have you used that?
No.
Did you go to
Chip
YouTube?
mails deal?
I did,
Or
yeah.
What did you grab?
MailChimp deal?
Okay.
They have a
May.
where you can like enter
That's
like before I was
incredible. I graduated
sending
May as
emails
well.
up to
Really?
parsing,
Cool.
wrapping them just on
I'm
my
very
own,
surprised
like,
we did not run into it.
Yeah.
Yeah, computer science.
Yeah.
Or no,
that
just
is
for
To
really
be
like,
fair,
our
I did
email.
CS
Yeah.
my last 2 years
And
of college,
subscribe
so I was in there like all 4 years in a row.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's
Yeah,
kind of
so
same
you just
to me.
like,
Like
take their
I did another
API,
degree
wrap it
before I
up and
switched
include,
over, and so.
Oh, okay, wow.
Objective-C class,
I know.
your Swift
You know,
file.
it's a big
If you have
school
the framework, and then
days, but it is very,
it's
very.
super
Did
easy
you
to
know,
like sign them
Andrew?
up for an email
Chip,
list
Sean,
if they
Jim?
jump in there, and he even gives like the
Asian guy, very
the
loud.
little,
I don't think
hey,
so.
you've been
No,
subscribed.
what about,
This is
I didn't really have a big group.
Click here or
Okay.
something.
I didn't really
so
fit in.
Did you spend time in the lab?
really handy thing to do if you
Sometimes, yeah.
Okay.
implement
Derek
actual
Smith.
email
know
lists.
No.
Yeah.
So that's fun.
Silence.
Yeah, I didn't really have a lot of friends, so.
No, it's cool. I spent like most of my time in the lab. That's why.
Yeah. Yeah, I really only was in the lab for Pintos.
Oh god. What semester did you take it?
So cool.
Like the fall of 2000.
14 or 13? It must have been 14.
This is the little guy.
Yeah.
So you had Norman.
Yes, he does.
probably.
Yeah, I know.
I had Norman.
Each like in different colors
That's
have like
weird.
other.
Very
This is
weird.
really.
Other, like, you
Yeah.
can collect them all.
You gotta, yeah, you gotta collect
And
them all.
then, yeah.
Gosh. Well, yeah.
That is bizarre.
Thanks for the
But-
demonstration.
Well, I'm
It's
glad,
cool.
glad I got to work after the fact. At
Yes.
least.
Hey, yeah.
But,
So you're working at Dell now?
Yeah, we're
The
gonna
curse of the demo.
I don't know. It's kind of a detour from like what I should be doing, like software oriented stuff. Because Dell's obviously like a hardware company.
Mhm.
But I don't know. I'm probably gonna get back on track
Very
at some
cool.
point in the near future.
Yeah.
Well, it seems like you're doing
Probably
well
we're heading out to
anyway,
the
so.
9 o'clock.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you intern at Jackrabbit before you?
So let's start there.
Kind of. I actually, I knew one of the partners there, and